Test, test, test. Is that working? No? I can't tell if that's working for you or not, Alicia. No sound? But it's not good enough. Oh. Okay. Well, I'm just leaving this on and talking so that she can tell if it's working or not. But I think even if we have to wait 5 or 10 minutes to try and fix it, I think that's better than starting. How well? It's working fine? Okay. (9:01), I'll call the meeting to order, and the first item of business is adoption of the agenda. Moved by Forbes, seconded by Grigg, that the agenda be adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any issues with the agenda? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We do have like many timed items today, and as usual, the clerk is aggressive with our time. So we have two minor variances at 9 o'clock and 3 zone changes at 9 o'clock, and then 9:30 delegation and 10 o'clock Robinson Pit public meeting. So we should be mindful of that as we go. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Not seeing any. Minutes. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Forbes, that the minutes from the July 6th, 2022 council meeting be adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any issues with those minutes? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And moved by Forbes, seconded by Grigg, that the minutes from the August 4th, 2022 special council meeting be adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any issues with those minutes? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And public comment period, and there are nobody submitted for the, thank you. And so on to public meetings and drainage meetings. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Forbes, that this council meeting be adjourned at 9:03 a.m. for the purposes of holding a public meeting pursuant to the provisions of the Planning Act. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And so for those of you who are here in person and on YouTube, we're now in a public meeting sitting as the Committee of Adjustment, same people, but not council now. Everybody switched hats, and now we're sitting as a Committee of Adjustment to hear two minor variance applications. And Spencer, I'll turn it over to you for 6A, minor variance application A13-22, submitted by Shelton Farms.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, Council, and any members of the public who might be joining us here this morning. The first application before you is A13-22, an application for minor variance. It affects property located on the east side of 41st Line and currently operates as a chicken farm. The applicant also owns the property on the west side of 41st Line, collectively known as Shelton Farms Limited. The applicant today is seeking relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw which allow for accessory structures and accessory dwellings on the farm property. They're seeking to establish a second permanent dwelling, and it's understood that the second permanent dwelling would be for a family member who helps operate the farm. In general, there were no issues upon circulation of the application. I will note, after discussion with Township Public Works, there will just be some requirements as far as any new entrances. It's understood that if this application is approved today, one current entrance may be closed and another entrance may be added to the property. That's a detail which typically would get worked out after the application is dealt with at the committee level. The applicant is in the audience today, available to answer any questions that the committee may have for him. In general, while nothing was received of any issue from members of the public or otherwise, staff at the county level, we aren't supportive of the application just given the size, scale, and other options which may be available to the owners of the property. However, I will just note that the county is working on new policies which the committee is aware of for additional residential units. And as such, I do think the form of these reports will change in the future once that comes into place, allowing and being more permissive for these second dwellings. I'm available to answer any questions that the committee may have for this one.
Thanks, Spencer. Questions from the committee for the planner on the report? I saw him here somewhere. There you are. Does the applicant wish to speak to your application? Okay. Anybody from the public wish to speak to this application, either here or on the line? Not seeing any. Then I will read the motion. Moved by Forbes, seconded by Grigg, that the Township of Zorra Committee of Adjustment approve minor variance application A13-22 submitted by Shelley and Jeremy Monroe for lands described as Lot 24, Concession 6 in the Township of Zorra as it relates to relief from the provisions of Section 7.2.4, number of accessory dwellings and garden suites per lot to permit a second single detached dwelling on a farm with the condition that the proposed second dwelling be located generally as shown on Plate 3 of Report 2022-326. Does anybody wish to speak to that? Paul.
It's just consistent with what we've done. I think this is about the 6th or 7th of this type of application, and we've set the precedents already. And as Spencer just alluded to, there are rule changes that probably in the near future would not make this type of an application necessary.
Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So there is a waiting period on this for appeal, but if you follow up with Spencer and or Mike, they'll keep you on the straight and narrow, and then you can proceed. Okay? Thanks. And Spencer, 6B, minor variance application A14-22, submitted by Kingwood Riverside Towns Limited. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I may just check to see if the applicant is available via Zoom. It looks like they are. This application, the committee will find very familiar because the almost identical application was recently submitted for Phase 1A of the townhouses along Middleton Street in Thamesford. This application today is for Phase 1B, which is located to the immediate south. It's near identical application. The applicant is seeking relief from the provision as it relates to the frontage, requiring that they have 5.5 meters of frontage, whereas it's been discovered of late that they have, in fact, 5.485 meters of frontage. I'm available for any questions as well. I see Amanda Stellings from GSP is also available online.
Thanks, Spencer. Any questions from the committee for Spencer on the report? Not seeing any. Does the applicant, Ms. Stellings, do you wish to speak to your application?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, generally we review the report and are supportive of staff's recommendation for approval.
Thanks. And is there anybody here from the public that wishes to speak to it, either in person or online? Not seeing any. So then I have moved by Forbes, seconded by Grigg, that the Township of Zorra Committee of Adjustment approve minor variance application A14-22 submitted by Kingwood Riverside Towns Limited for lands described as Park Lots 6 and 7, Plan 45, Concession 1, Reference Plan 41R-197 and 41R-3608 in the Township of Zorra as it relates to relief from Section 13, Table 13.3, 10.2.2, lot frontage to reduce the minimum required lot frontage for a street fronting townhouse from 5.5 to meters 18 feet to 5.4 meters 17.7 feet. Does anybody wish to speak to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And just a reminder here from staff that we need to speak up and directly into our microphones so that everybody can hear. And then Spencer 6C, zone change application ZN 5-22-08, submitted by the Corporation of the Township of Zorra pertaining to lands described as South Part Lot 7, Concession Number 3, North Oxford, Township of Zorra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The application for zone change that we're dealing with currently for the Township of Zorra is with respect to the former Thamesford Fire Hall. It's a property located on Allen Street in Thamesford. As outlined in the report, the applicant in this instance is proposing to rezone the property such that it would allow for an office-type use as well as an accessory apartment unit. The application in general is supportable. The applicant initially had requested a highway commercial type zone for the property. However, staff have indicated that it's more appropriate to go into a residential type zone which restricts the permitted uses only to the office use and the accessory apartment use. This is just given that the lands are located in a low-density residential designation rather than a village designation, which may be more permissive as far as the permitted uses in that designation and zone. As a result of circulation, there were no concerns or comments received that indicate any issue with the proposal. I don't believe the applicant in this instance is the Township of Zorra. However, there is an intended user for this. There's an agreement of purchase and sale in place. If there are any specific questions, I would ask that council direct those to Don McLeod.
Thanks, Spencer. Are there any questions from council for Spencer on the report? Ron.
I'm confused as to why we've ended up with the residential zoning on this property, because we don't want, I shouldn't say we don't want, I guess our intent was not to have a resident in that property. We're going to have an apartment there, okay. Rental properties are in short supply, and if we can have one more small unit there, that's fine. But to have the whole property zoned residential, I'm concerned that that's just opening a window that maybe we don't want opened.
Anybody else? Questions for the planner on the report?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just a matter of clarification to Councillor Forbes' comment. The bylaw itself, as it's worded, would restrict the uses to only an office use and a singular accessory apartment unit. So that would, in turn, take care of any potential issue with somebody if the property were to change hands again, establishing more than one accessory apartment unit or any other use, quite frankly, than what's currently outlined in the bylaw, which is an office.
Is there a square footage on that apartment? Like, what's stopping it from becoming entirely a residence.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there isn't currently a cap on square footage for the apartment unit. It is indicated that it's clearly that it's to be accessory to the office, however. So generally, in terms of making that determination, staff would look at the office use and ensure that the footprint and other details associated with the apartment make clear that it is in fact accessory to the office use.
Anyone else? Questions? Katie?
I have a question for Don. So the application is,
And I'm just going to interrupt you there because technically on this application, he's going to be answering this as the applicant. So
Correct.
are you able to direct that either to Spencer right now as the planner
Or wait.
wait until questions for the applicant? I'll give you a second to think about it. I just want to try and keep us,
yeah,
with all the other applications we have here, want to keep us consistent and fair for everybody. I'll give you a
Fair
second to
enough.
think about it. Anybody else? Questions for the planner on the report? Katie?
the zone change mapping is outlined for the property all the way back to the river. But in regards to the portion of that property that was part of the sale, it was not quite as far back. The mapping did not show quite as far back. Is there, with the zone change being mapped as all the way back to the river, does that have any impact on that property line in terms of where the sale property goes to?
No, it doesn't.
So sorry, this is for the planner.
Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, while I can't speak to the agreements of the purchase and sale, I would note that the proposal is quite clear in that it proposes a retrofit to the existing building. And further, the majority of the property is regulated by the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority as far as the floodplain. There would be no future uses or otherwise which could be proposed in that area that would be supported from the CA standpoint, is my understanding. And further, staff would agree that the appropriateness of this applies to the existing building.
Any other questions for the planner on the report? Does the applicant wish to speak to their application? Are there any questions from council for the applicant? Ron? Is there anybody from the public, either here in person or online? So if you could stand and just state your name and address for the record, and then go ahead.
And I think you kind of addressed a little bit of it. I just don't want, is he going to use whoever is going to use the existing building and not go back further onto the river bank? Because I don't want to see pavement down there. I mean, it's floodplain land. How far can you go back?
So
Because we're not allowed to build behind our place. So just asking questions.
Yep, absolutely. That's what it's for. So the application in front of council today is for a zone change. So it's not for a building permit or anything like that. It's for a change of use as outlined in the application. But yes, there are limits on what can be done on the property. But as with your property, those are mainly limited by the regulated zone by Upper Thames, which limits how far anybody can build anything there, including paving or even gravel paths and things like
Okay.
that. So the same, what I can tell you is that in principle, the same conditions that would apply to any of the properties backing onto the river would apply to this property with respect to Upper Thames and their regulations. Spencer, would you agree?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. I would further add that the property will be subject to a site plan approval process. So should this application be approved today, the applicant or the future applicant, as the case may be, would have to come forward with a plan that shows any proposed parking, any signage, any lighting, any of those details are worked through at the township level through a site plan process.
And that would have to go through approval, and then there would be, like somebody like me would be able to say whether I liked it or not?
It would depend on the nature of what they were asking for.
Okay.
So if what they asked for was consistent with Upper Thames regulations and all of our zoning, then they would just be getting a building permit and no one would know, just like no one would know if you got a building permit that complied with everything, it would just be a building permit. If they were asking for something that went beyond that, so permission to go beyond what their zone change allows or what Upper Thames would allow, then there would be a public process and there would be opportunity for public input. So it would depend on what they were going to do.
Okay.
Just,
No,
just the same as with your property, right? If you were going to put a tiny micro deck on the back that didn't infringe on it, building permit, away you go.
right.
You want to go into that regulated zone, then that would be a public process that would require approval, and there would be opportunity for anybody to comment on yours, just like this one.
Okay. That's
Okay.
good. All right, thank
All
you.
right, no problem. Anybody else want to speak to this application? Anybody online to speak to this one? No? Okay. So then, for everybody who's watching how this is going to go, council is not going to decide on this one because we're in a public meeting right now. We're going to go on to the next zone change, go through the same process again, then we're going to come out of the public meeting, and then council will decide on both zone changes. Okay? You guys are good? Okay. Always nervous when clerks are talking to each other. All right. So, Spencer, then over to you for 6. Sorry, I lost my way here because it's double-sided. 6C, correct? No, D, sorry. 6D, zone change application ZN 5-22-09.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Picking up on your cues there. The application for a zone change in front of you now, ZN 5-2209, is also one in which the Township of Zorra is the applicant. This application is with respect to the new Public Works Yard, which Council and the committee is very familiar with. The purpose of this application really is to ensure consistent zoning is across the entirety of the site. As outlined on the plate that's on the screen before Council now, and for members of the public who are watching this on the screen, the little box there that says I, that represents the institutional zone, and the intent here is to incorporate also the additional lands outlined in red so that it's all consistently under that institutional zone, which is appropriate and common practice for properties owned by the township. I am available for any questions today. If the committee has any technical questions with respect to the building or the use itself, I do know that Steve Oliver is also in the room if those may be directed to him.
Thanks, Spencer. Questions from council for Spencer on the report? Not seeing any. Does the applicant wish to speak to their application?
So this is actually just cleaning up an oversight when the township purchased the property, or once construction started is actually when we should have had the property rezoned, so we're just coming in a little bit late with the application.
And is there anybody here from the public, either in person or online, that wants to speak to this application? Not seeing any. So then we will move on to, I don't know, I'm just going to like flip a coin. I mean, they're all at 9 o'clock, so, you know. I think, Spencer, what do you think? I think D is the last one we have, right? C, sorry, C. Zone change application ZN 5-22-08, submitted by the Corporation of the Township of Zorra. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The final application for a zone change before council today, ZN 5-2208, is the application. Also, the applicant in this case is the township. And this zone change application actually applies to the building in which we're sitting today and the property which we're located at currently as far as the township office. It is anticipated that at some point in the future the township will be relocating to a different office, and as such, this application is brought forward to try and do some of the preparation work in order to facilitate a future sale of this building. The requested proposal for this one, as far as the zone change, was really to put it into a highway commercial type of zone, which is more appropriate for these lands as far as their future use. It is a good fit as far as compatibility with the surrounding area. There are some smaller A1 type parcels in the immediate area, as well as an agribusiness user to the immediate east, and then further located east, the town of Ingersoll and their town boundaries. The one thing that I will highlight for council is just that there is some discussion internally between whether or not this site would be appropriate as a site for a single detached dwelling as a standalone use. Staff are of the opinion that, generally speaking, this site would be most appropriate for a highway commercial type of use. We can't yet anticipate what the user might come as far as when they try to purchase the property. However, by putting it into a highway commercial use and allowing for an accessory residential component, that would be consistent with our planning practice. There was some discussion between Don and I as to whether or not that single detached dwelling would be appropriate as a standalone use, and so I would just highlight for council that if council believes that this site is appropriate for a standalone single detached dwelling, they should not approve this application. They should approve it in principle, because I would need to redraft the bylaw to come back and actually outline that a single detached dwelling be a permitted use, whereas currently it's drafted in such a way that it's an accessory residential component, accessory to a highway commercial use. So I will just make that differentiation for council, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Spencer. Questions from council for Spencer on the report? Katie.
Just asking a clarification of the last point that you just made, which thank you for detailing that. So with this zone change to highway commercial, the residential component would have to be accessory to a commercial use. But this property could, in theory, be rezoned, be sold, and a future owner could bring it back for consideration for further zone change to a residential use if that was their interest, and council at that time would be able to look at that application.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Councillor Gregg's question. That is true. However, it would be a separate application altogether. Generally, what we're doing here, what the township is trying to do, is just get this into a highway commercial zone. We can't anticipate, like I say, who the purchaser will be, so they may contemplate a use which is not outlined today. And as such, they would have to come back and request that. However, if it's already in the highway commercial zone, it would likely be more appropriate to add an additional highway commercial type of use. Even a residential component, if they came back, if a purchaser came and said, we only want this for a residential, we don't want it to be accessory to an office or any other type of use, that would require another new application.
Any other questions for Spencer on the report? Are there any questions? Does the applicant wish to speak to their application?
Yes. So the reason the application was submitted in the fashion that it was, requesting residential, was to improve the marketability of the property. So we had requested the residential use to be part of the zoning, and as Spencer has said, that it is not at this point, but it could be added if council so directs. So from a marketing point of view, we do feel there would be better value in this if it was marketed as highway commercial and or residential.
Any questions for the applicant? Paul?
Not really for the applicant. It's a procedural question as to how we get from, so with the motion that you have in front of you, we can amend that motion.
Well, I haven't read it yet, so there's no motion here, so you
Yep.
can do whatever you want with it.
Okay. I'm not 100% sure what's.
Ron, go ahead.
Why, I'm a little confused on to why we're changing the zoning at all. We sold the fire hall, it was zoned institutional, and then rezoned it to accommodate the purchaser. Why is that not an option here?
It is an option. We're not sure when it's going to be listed, so we just wanted to be ready. I have several real estate agents that know of this, and they're not actively marketing the property, but they are aware of it, so we wanted to be ready to go should someone come in with an offer. Also, we wanted to try and scope down the uses that we felt would be appropriate for the site, given its location. We're close to a neighbor, so we wanted to be respectful of that neighbor, while still maintaining some marketability for the property.
Paul?
Yeah, I think makes sense. We zone it so we can maximize the number of people that would be interested in buying it. I'm not comfortable with the wording that we have to put in there to get that done. Need some advice on that.
Yeah. Double check that's the right one. It is. Any other questions for the applicant? Is there anybody here from the public, either online or in person, that wishes to speak to this application? All right. Absolutely.
So the proposal here is to zone it special highway commercial, and it's the residential component. That's just an add-on to that zoning, if the new buyer wanted to use it as residential property and commercial all at the same time.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Forbes' question, if a future purchaser was satisfied with one of the specific highway commercial type uses outlined, and just wanted to add, currently it's included such that they could have an accessory residential component to that. Really what we're trying to differentiate is if somebody came and only wanted to use this property for residential purposes with no highway commercial component, that would require them to come back at that time with an application. However, as I mentioned earlier, council has the option to approve in principle and direct staff to prepare a bylaw which would allow for a single detached dwelling. If they're satisfied with that direction. Alternatively, if council is satisfied with the highway commercial special and the list of permitted uses there, then that's fine too. Staff are willing to work with council on whatever direction we may receive.
Anyone else? Questions? Wait, you'll get to hear it in a minute. You didn't move it or second it. Everybody will hear it in a minute. Yeah, because he moved it. Initiative pays. So is there, again, just since there were a couple of questions, is there anybody online or in person that wishes to speak to this application? No? Okay. So, moved by Grigg, seconded by Forbes, that pursuant to the Planning Act, that the public meeting be adjourned at 9:31 a.m. and the regular meeting of council be called back to order. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And now, Steve, moved by Forbes, seconded by Grigg, that the Council of the Township of Zorra approve zone change application ZN5-22-08 submitted by the Township of Zorra for lands described as South Part Lot 7, concession number 3, North Oxford, Township of Zorra, to rezone the subject property from the institutional zone I to special highway commercial zone HC-12, as the proposed amendment maintains the intent and purposes of the official plan. Councilor Forbes, do you wish to speak to that?
No, we've hashed it out pretty good, I think.
Councilor Grigg.
Yes, please. So a bit of a curveball today, this morning, thinking about sort of what zoning is going to optimize the best benefit for the municipality, and definitely feeling the weight of a big build and looking for resources to fund a municipal center in Zorra is, in the back of my mind when thinking about optimizing the marketability of this property. But what I'm coming back to is sort of, you know, like from a broader economic development standpoint, that highway commercial is not something that we have a significant availability of. Businesses are looking for locations to set up shop and do business in Zorra. And so I'm not comfortable going with the residential zoning on this property to allow for this to be used only solely as a residential lot. Could that bring more revenue towards into the municipality? In the short term, yes. In the long term, I'm guessing not. If by chance the only interested parties for purchasing this property once rezoned are only looking for residential, they have the ability to bring an application back, and council can consider that application at that time. But for now, I would like to do what we can to support hopefully having a business be able to find a great location in Zorra Township to set up shop and do business. So I am in support of this motion as written.
Anyone else? Paul?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with what Katie just said. I think it may make this property a little bit more valuable in the short term, but in the long term, I think this property is better suited for highway commercial development rather than a monster home being put on it. So I will support the application.
Anyone else? I will read it again and call the question. Moved by Forbes, seconded by Grigg, that the Council of the Township of Zorra approves zone change application ZN5-22-08 submitted by the Township of Zorra for lands described as South Part Lot 7 every time. Concession number 3, North Oxford Township of Zorra to rezone the subject property from the institutional zone I to special highway commercial zone HC12, as the proposed amendment maintains the intent and purpose of the official plan. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And moved by Grigg, seconded by Forbes, that the Council of the Township of Zorra approve zone change application ZN 5-22-09 submitted by the Township of Zorra, whereby the lands described as Part Lot 10, concession number 11, East Nizuri, Township of Zorra to rezone the subject property from General Agricultural Zone A2 to Institutional Zone I. Katie is the mover. Do you want to speak to that? Ron? Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And last in planning, moved by Grigg, seconded by Mitchell, that the Council of the Township of Zorra approve the zone change application ZN 5-22-10 submitted by the Township of Zorra CO Don McLeod, whereby the lands described as Part Lot 1, Concession 10, Registered Plan Number 105, Part Lot 6 and 7, Reference Plan 41R96, Part 3, and municipally known as 124 Allen Street, Thamesford, in the Township of Zorra be rezoned from Institutional Zone I to Special Residential Type 1 Zone R1-29 to facilitate the establishment of an office building and an accessory residential apartment unit. Katie is the mover. Do you want to speak to that? Paul? Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And we are at 9:36 and delegation. Is Mr. Dicer here? Dicer? Sorry? Dacer. So if you can come up to, everybody else getting that echo too? It's better now. Oh, okay. All right. Not for me. Anyway, if it works for you, that's what's important. So Mr. Dacer, I would say, this is your time. I always say to all delegates, assume that council has read what you've submitted and hit your high points so you can get some engagement with them, and over to you.
It's better, thank you. Anxious to get the a modification done to the dog park at Grace Patterson to facilitate small dogs separated from large dogs. We've had several incidences where even my dog, as a small dog, has been, I guess, manhandled by large dogs and created some challenges, some health issues. And as we grow as a community, we find more and more people using the dog park. and more large dogs using the dog park. And there's been situations where we'll have 7 or 8 small dogs and they're congregating, and all of a sudden 2 large bloodhounds will come in and just disrespect that we are trying to, use the space as well, and we end up having to leave just for the safety of our dogs. I've had conversations with Matthew Brown at one time or another regarding, I understand it was at one point in the budget for this current year, and was removed. There was a cost of about $19,000. We have revised that plan, or Matthew has, to where it's about a $12,000 bill to facilitate a small area segregated for small dogs of 10 kilos or less. There's most communities have a designated small dog area in their community. We, at the present time, don't. We are concerned, again, for the safety of dogs, and even, as silly as it sounds, the safety of adults. There has been some situations where people have tried to protect their small dog and have been knocked over or bowled over by a rambunctious large dog or large pup, which has caused some injury to them as well. I don't see it getting any better as we grow. I feel that this is a necessity of some sort, just to allow us to, I guess, use the facility in a respectful manner for all dogs and animals that are using it. The cost, I think we projected, would be about a $12,000 bill to give us the revised area with a fence that would segregate the 2 animals, or 2 sizes. I think that's really my presentation. I know, I'm hoping there might be something in the contingency budget that hasn't been spent that might be able to facilitate this currently, or at least, get it on the front burner for future, if nothing else.
Thanks very much.
You're very welcome.
Are there any questions from council, from Mr. Dason? Paul?
Thank you for your delegation. It certainly shines a different light on it than when this came before council when we were considering our budget. The one question I have, and I'm curious about the petition that you submitted, and at the top of each page it says, quote, we use regularly or have used the Thamesford off-leash park. And you have 90 signees.
Yes.
And majority of them are local, and I understand that there could be visitors from London and the GTA visiting Thamesford and walking their dogs, but there's 25 signees from the U.S., Europe, Japan, Australia, and South America. So I just wonder, have all these people come to Thamesford to walk their dog, or how did you collect these names?
We collected them at the dog park, where there'd be people there, there'd be campers or tourists traveling through with their animals, and they'd stop to they'd see the dog park and they'd want to use it. We were there on a regular basis over about a 4-week period, almost daily, trying to get people to acknowledge and sign the petition in favor of this. And some of the people that signed it were even big dog owners that, again, felt, yes, it would be nice if there wasn't this issue of the intermingling of the 2 sizes, for the simple fact that they don't want their dog to hurt another dog, and vice versa.
So the petition itself wasn't an online petition or something?
It was online. We give them a card and say, go online and sign it if you could, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's how you got
That's how
people
we
from
got them.
around the world?
Exactly.
Okay. So
But
still
the card was-
without those names, there's a significant number of people that have signed
Sorry, I
the
was just
petition.
I didn't mean to talk over you, Paul.
No,
I was
that's
just going to
all right.
clarify, but the card was handed out to people at the park. I mean, they
Yes.
could have handed it on to anybody they want. but-
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to understand that. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else? Katie?
I just wanted to thank you for your delegation and the work that you've put into doing this. I know I've had many conversations with different dog owners around the village who have been in full support of this project, and I did speak in favor of it at last budget deliberations, and I'm still in full support of it now. I'm a very large dog owner. I have a dog that's about 100 pounds, and I see the value in this for large dog owners just as much as small dog owners. When the dogs start playing, there's only so much that can happen between dogs that are similar sized. You know your dog, if it's aggressive or not, but even if your dog is non-aggressive, when there's a huge size differential, then there is a greater risk of an accident happening and someone getting hurt. So the presentation really puts a lot of focus on the benefits for small dog owners and for their owners. for the dogs and the owners, sorry. But I do appreciate that comment that you made, that it really does benefit all users of the park, all sizes of dog and all humans that enter that space. I know in the past when I've been there with my family, depending on who's in there, we either decide if we want to stay or leave. And so this just creates a much safer environment for everybody to use, and hopefully have more people using the park. So not so much a question, just a comment and a thank you for your
Oh, you're
work.
welcome. My pleasure.
Any other questions, Ron?
The quote that's in front of us here, that was the original one. I think we saw it back at the last budget of $20,000 for roughly 200 feet of fence. And you're proposing to kind of cut that, shorten it a little bit with the revised plan. But when you gave your presentation, it caught my attention that you were talking about the growing use of that park. And then I'm thinking, should we even consider that as cutting a part of the park out? Like, do we need to expand it, and the expansion becomes the small dog area, rather than trying to cut it out of what we have? And yeah, and then what I know about the fencing, your proposal by cutting square footage, I would be surprised if it cut the cost very much.
Well, it was, the reality was the lineal feet, and really whenever you do fencing, it's all about lineal feet of what the cost is. And we basically adjusted it to reflect the lineal feet of fencing needed for the smaller area. In response to is the size big enough to facilitate that? That dog park is huge in all respect, and if you're ever there watching the dogs, majority of the time, 80% of the time, 90% of the dogs are in that front half of the dog park. And only if they're throwing a ball and chasing it with the big dogs do they ever go down the other end. So I don't think the space would be lost, if that be the way to say it, by creating that. And again, the whole purpose is, at $20,000, it didn't make budget. And I'm hoping by revising it and making it more palatable, if that be the way to say it, it may give us the opportunity to facilitate the work. I know that, some of us are even prepared, I hate to say this, but, some sort of a cost sharing involved to some aspect too. That's how important it is for our dogs, right? That we just, if we can raise a couple thousand to help with the cost, we'd be, I'm sure, happy to do that amongst ourselves. Ideally, we don't want to, but again, a $100 donation is a lot cheaper than a $500 or $600 vet bill because our dog got jumped on.
Any other questions for the delegation? Steve?
Yeah, I've brought up a couple of things, and touching on what Ron just said, whether it's expanded or not, you just said yourself that it is a large park right now. Mm-hmm. What about I'm just tossing this up as an idea, but what about a simple barrier fence instead of fencing off a whole area, just straight across it, and say, little dogs come in this end, big dogs come in the other end. They're separated.
Is that a question for the delegation?
No. It's just a comment, an idea.
That is essentially what it is that they're asking for. It's just strategically placed interior fencing with a separate latched entry point in to just split the space. So it is essentially, am I understanding correctly? Maybe Matt Brown, if you want to clarify.
The drawings were, so I communicated with Alan ahead and provided kind of help him with some drawings so there's the original proposal, which was a bit more square in nature coming in from the entrance, and then we looked at adding more of a mitered or 45-degree angle across, and that's where we get the reduction in. If I haven't measured exactly, but if we partitioned it at a 2/3 point, if we went straight across, I don't think we're going to see a large reduction in the linear feet of fencing. And we would also then have to modify the entry points for both the existing park and the newly created small dark area, potentially more than what we're at with this. So it's something that can be investigated. It's just, this is kind of a preliminary design that would, once again, have to be quoted out by a contractor formally to get us a firm number.
Any other questions for the delegation? Thank you very much. I do have a motion here from council. They're going to debate that and then decide what to do with it. So
Okay.
you're free to stay for that, absolutely, and hear what they have to say.
Great, thank you.
So moved by Grigg, seconded by Mitchell, that staff be directed to prepare a report and obtain quotes for revised small dog area for the Thamesford Dog Park, and that the project be included in the 2023 capital budget. Katie is the mover. Do you want to speak to that?
When we add infrastructure, amenities in the municipality, we have a responsibility to keep them in proper functioning order. The dog park came to Thamesford as part of a significant fundraising initiative with some corporate sponsorship, and now we have this really great place for people to bring their dogs, whether they live in the village or just traveling and passing through or visiting from other places in the municipality. It's pretty clear from the delegation that there's some safety concerns in the function of the dog park in the ways that are specific to Thamesford and don't typically exist in other dog parks because they have that small dog area that we don't have. I really appreciate my sort of love of grade 9 math and younger, the Pythagorean theorem opportunity for savings there, like that, you know, that diagonal line cutting down on the amount of fencing. It not only is going to provide an opportunity for this project to not be quite as costly, but I think it's also going to allow for better function in that access point to the park so that you're not bottlenecking, you know, people coming in and out with their dogs and sort of creating a bit of some traffic congestion there. So the motion that I've written is to basically authorize staff to get out there and get some estimates on this revised plan and to have them included in the 2023 budget. Sometimes when community members come forward with ideas for improvements to the community, we undertake this fundraising 1/3, 2/3 that we've seen with the splash pad and the multi-use courts in Thamesford. When a project is of this scope, I think it's a small enough costing project, and it's something that we've already approved, we already own, and it's just not functioning safe enough for our residents. I think we have a responsibility to deal with it, and adding it into our 2023 budget, I think, is the easiest way to go about this and not have it tie up any more staff time than what it needs to.
Paul is the seconder.
When this came before at budget time, I was the person adamant that it not be included in the budget. At the time it came out of the blue, was included as a line item. There was no justification for it other than a few people had asked for it, and people asked for a lot of things. And at the time we were desperately trying to find things that we could cut from the budget and reduce the tax increase. But your letter, your presentation has certainly shone a different light on it. This is a facility of the township. We have definitely, if not a legal responsibility, now that we know that these incidents are have taken place and are liable to take place in the future where people and animals have been injured. And beyond that, we have a moral responsibility to make this safe for the people and the animals that use it. So that's why I've done a 180 on this, and I support the motion that Katie wrote that we included in next year's budget, and the staff look at the best design and the best options to subdivide the dog park into a large and small. So that's why I'm going to vote to support it.
Anyone else? I guess, I'll read it again and call the question. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Mitchell, that staff be directed to prepare a report and obtain quotes for a revised small dog area for the Thamesford Dog Park, and that the project be included in the 2023 capital budget. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. I mean, now that it's a tourist attraction and all, you know, economic development driver and everything. I would echo Councillor Grigg's comments about engagement that, and Councillor Mitchell as well made the point that, you know, when it came as sort of a thud, here's a request to spend money, It went nowhere, didn't go in the budget. As soon as you went out and did the work of engaging with residents and then demonstrating to council that there was an issue here and everything, different result. So I think a lot of the time residents feel like we should just be able to ask it and get it, and maybe in some cases we should. But I think there's always value in engagement, and I think the evidence is here that, you know, when that engagement happens, the result is frequently quite different. So I want to thank you for doing that work. You may not get the thanks later on from people, so I want to make sure you get it now. That you did the work and the report's going to happen. I would encourage you also to follow up and see what council decides when they get that report, because there's not a little small dog park yet. Okay? Thanks very much. And I'm going to suggest, if you guys want, that we take a break, come back in here like 5 after 10 and start with Robinson Pit. You're good? So we're adjourned until, say, 5 past 10?